At the offering this morning, if we could go to the book of Hebrews, please, in the New Testament, the book of Hebrews, chapter 7. I'm going to start reading from verse 1 for the benefit of those who are not maybe familiar with the story. I'm just going to highlight a few things again. But the author is recalling a narrative from Genesis 14, which is what I was looking at last week. And he says, this Melchizedek, now this is a king who intercepted Abraham on his way back from the slaughter of the kings before he encountered the king of Sodom. And the author writes the following, says, this Melchizedek, king of Shalem and priest of God Most High, met Abraham on his way back from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him. And also Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. Now, first of all, by translation of his name, he is king of righteousness. And then he is also king of Shalem, which means king of peace. So again, for those of you who are not aware, the author here is just highlighting what the actual Hebrew name means. Melchizedek, from Melech, which is king, and from Tzedek, which is righteousness. And I presume, although I speak under correction, that is probably where we get the New Testament term Sadducees from, the Tzedukim, those who proclaimed to be righteous. So he is both king and of righteousness, and then by the narrative we know that he was king of Shalem, which is a primitive name for Jerusalem, and it comes from the Hebrew word shalom, which means peace. So that just explains to you where he gets this all from. Now here's the important bit. He says, just think how great this Melchizedek was. Even the patriarch Abraham gave him a tenth of the choicest spoils. Now the descendants of Levi who become priests have a commandment in the Torah, or in the law, to take a tenth of the income of the people, that is from their own brothers, despite the fact that they too are descended from Abraham. But Melchizedek, even though he was not descended from Levi, took a tenth from Abraham. And also he blessed Abraham, the man who received God's promises, and it is beyond all dispute that the one who blesses has higher status than the one who receives the blessing. Now, to put all of this back into context for us, this is not a passage about the tithe. The author is not talking about the tithe per se. What he is doing is he is using the tithe as an illustrative purpose, because his argument is as follows, that the tribe of Levi were honored by their brothers by them giving a tenth so that that tribe could worship and minister to the Lord, and in return minister to the nation of Israel. That is the argument that he's trying to establish here. So what he's basically saying is, Levi was great enough to receive a tenth, and Levi was in Abraham. And Abraham is even greater than Levi, and yet Abraham paid a tenth to Melchizedek. So his argument basically is, no matter how far back you want to take your patriarchal lineage, there is one in the Old Testament who was greater than Abraham himself. And this is Melchizedek. That is the argument that the author is trying to portray here. Why? Because he's building on this premise that Melchizedek represents a different type of priesthood, a priesthood that is not like the priesthood of Aaron, the high priest. He represents both the culmination of a priesthood and a kingship. That's why he is Melchizedek, the king of righteousness, but also priest of God Most High. So what the author is doing is he's using this character as a prototype of the new type of priesthood that is represented by the resurrected Christ Jesus. That he is both our king, the king of the new kingdom, and he is our high priest who has interceded for us and whose intercession continues to stand for us before the throne of God. That's the whole argument here. But the purpose or the point that I want to make this morning is, in using the tithe as an illustration of the theology that this author wants to lay down, what he's also teaching us is that the tithe is part of us honoring those who are higher than us in status. And who is higher in us in status than Jesus Christ himself? Are we willing, and that's where I want to get to this morning, are we willing to pay the one who we proclaim is Lord, the one who we proclaim is our high priest? Are we willing to pay him the honor that is due his name? Now, there are many ways that we can worship, but the point of the matter is that one of those aspects of our worship is allowing God to take control of our finances, allowing God to deal with our heart and say, you know what, Lord, from everything that you've given me, I give you a small portion. Why? Because God's principle always works on sowing and reaping. He wants us to sow so that we can honor him, so that we in turn, like Abraham there, as we read, may be blessed by him. And the author says there, the greater always blesses the lesser. Now, I'm aware that one or two of you who know the Hebrew will say, yeah, but wait a minute, doesn't the word barach mean that I can go down on my knees and bless the Lord in worship? Yes, it means that as well. But a baracha, a blessing, is poured out from the patriarch to his sons. The blessing goes usually from the higher to the lower. And the only way that we can return that blessing is by coming in worship on our knees and saying, yes, Lord, thank you that you have made it possible for me to have a relationship with you, that you are my king and my priest eternally in heaven. And that's what we honor this morning.